Hey everybody, welcome back to Bible Fun with the Duns. Today we finished up Mark chapter number 16, and with that we finished up the book of Mark. So I want to just welcome you to Easter 2025. Now, not really, but we just finished this, and this is the passage, right? Everything Mark has been doing, somebody's getting ice in our house, that's what you're hearing. Everything Mark's been doing has been leading up to this point, up to the resurrection. And what we have here, we have the most important moment in all of everything. Everything hinges on this one resurrection moment. Now, let me just kind of walk you through a few things that I think might help you when you're kind of reading through this. I like how whenever the passage starts, like in verse number 1, when the Sabbath was passed, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome brought spices that they might come and anoint him. So you got this story opening up with these ladies who are coming very early in the morning, and they're coming to the tomb of Jesus. Now, the reason why they're coming very early in the morning is because you remember that the way Jewish, like their days were set up, in our minds, everything starts at midnight. Okay, so a day starts at midnight. That's where AM begins, and it goes all the way around until 11:59, and then it starts all over again. In the Jewish world, it was really like from evening to morning kind of situation. So they're waiting until the first possible moment after the Sabbath to be able to go to the tomb. And here's what they're worried about. They knew, because they had seen where Jesus had been laid, that a massive stone kind of cap was laid over the tomb of this, over the door of the tomb. Now, the tomb was a hollowed out cave with basically a little laying area for a body. The body would lay there for sometimes like a year. It would decompose. Then family would come inside and they would collect the bones of a dead person. They would put them in a little concrete box and set them aside in a family tomb. Those were called ossuaries. But as part of the decomposing situation, while the bodies were wrapped in linen, they weren't embalmed, so they would put like spices in the linen to hide the smell. And so since Jesus' family had not, like, we don't see Jesus' brothers or sisters or cousins coming out of Nazareth to kind of handle this, Jesus' disciples are doing this. And so the ladies are wondering, well, who's going to roll the stone away? And it's one of those reminders for me when I hear that. Like, we often worry about stuff that's not an issue, okay? They're worried about who's going to roll the stone away without remembering this has already been done, okay? This is unnecessary preparation. You also have to remember that it says the Sabbath was passed. So the rest time is complete, not just for the week, not just for the Sabbath day, but the time of the resting, the time that everything has been kind of leading toward, the rest is over. Now it's time to get up. So on the Sabbath, you were supposed to rest, lay down, recoup, and all that kind of stuff. But the day after the Sabbath, you got up and you went back to work. What did Jesus do the day after the Sabbath? He got up and he went back to work. Mary Magdalene is always mentioned in all the Gospels as like the central kind of witness to the resurrection, which is important because, Mary Magdalene really overcame a pretty evil beginning. The Bible talks about her being possessed by demons and the Lord casting those out, and now she's the first witness of the resurrection. There's also some timeline things here because the ladies have come to the tomb. They see the angel. In like Luke, there's two angels. Mark's only going to really talk about one of them. The reason is the same reason he talked about Legion, the guy who was possessed by a demon. There are actually two demon-possessed guys in that story. Mark only talks about Legion because Legion was the only one talking. The only angel to talk here is the one that Mark's talking about. He's hitting the high points of this. But you got to understand, like, when Mary Magdalene finds out she sees this angel, Jesus is alive, she runs to go tell Peter and John. The other ladies stay. Mary comes back. So there's a whole lot of like moving. And there's a whole lot they're processing. They're not telling. They're scared. They're afraid. They're confused. And they must have seen dozens of people walking to and from just going to work that day. But they're not able to process. This is mind-blowing to them. Now, the great seal of death. Remember, this tomb had been closed up. A seal had been put on it. This seal of death had not only just been like physically busted and open, symbolically the seal of death for all has been defeated. Why? Because Jesus' resurrection has defeated death, hell, sin, and the grave. David Jeremiah is going to talk about this large stone being rolled away. He said it's not rolled away so that Jesus could get out. It was rolled away so that we could see from the outside in that he wasn't even there. And there's also this idea that, you know, in every cemetery I've ever been to, there are signs that say, you know, here lies such and such. There's a birth date and an end date and all that kind of stuff. The sign on Jesus's grave just says, he is not here. He is risen. And that's what's happening in all of this. And then the disciples are told, or the ladies are told to go and look in the place where he was. He is not risen. He's here. And then they say, go tell the disciples that he's alive. Tell them to go to Galilee. You will see him as he said to you. And so that's a fulfillment of chapter 14, verse 28. And so way back in chapter number 14, Jesus had told his disciples in talking to him, he said, but after I've been raised, I will go before you into Galilee. Well, what's all that saying? That's saying that they had gone to bed that weekend thinking that the death of Jesus was the end. They had woken up on that Sunday morning with the start of a new week, understanding the work hadn't finished. The work had only really just first begun, because now what's happening? Well, what's happening now is that they're getting this great commission, go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. So experiencing the resurrected Jesus has now given them a motivation for what is to be their life to come now. And so a church, whether it's a church member, a church person, a church at large, or the whole church at large, our church is either going to evangelize or it's going to fossilize. That's what Adrian Rogers said. But here's what it's not going to do. It's not going to stand still. It's either going to move, it's either going to go, or it's going to stay, and it's going to kind of petrify. What we have in Mark is this idea that the Lord is now at work within his people. Okay? And so these lowly, obedient fishermen and tax collectors and ladies who show up at the tomb, they now begin as this very small core that turns the world upside down. Is it because they're powerful? No, even though the Lord does give them special, unique abilities according to that time. But what is their influence? Their influence, even in the book of Acts, just says this, that people recognize they had been with Jesus. And so now they will go out. The path of discipleship will not always be clear. They're praying about where they're going, but they're going faithfully. They're shining in paths of service. They'll be rejected. They'll be persecuted. They will discover daily that as much as they had to walk with Jesus while he was in their ministry, the ongoing mission of the church is they must walk with Jesus now as his Spirit lives in them. They have to walk in the Spirit every day and not fulfill the lusts of the flesh, but walk in the Spirit, taking off the old man, putting on the new man. They needed Jesus as much now as they ever did. And so now they're walking in this, evangelizing the world, and you go, well, of course they could do that. Like they're super Christians. They've walked with Jesus. They've seen the resurrection. Well, look, I think Mark is trying to tell us this is not as easy as we assume. They are not some kind of super Christians at this point, because the first hours after the resurrection are anything but triumphant displays of faith. It says in verse 11, and when they heard that he was alive and been seen by her, they did not believe. In verse 13, and they went out and they told the rest, but they did not believe them either. And so they didn't believe over and over again. Why? Because the resurrection was going to require faith. Now their faith would become sight because Jesus was going to show up. But understand, these are not fully formed Christians yet. They believe in Christ, but they're like us. They got a long way to go. And so how do they do it? They keep walking with Jesus. Why? Because he is resurrected and his Spirit lives in them. They will walk in him and he will sanctify them. Exactly how it works with us. You say, yeah, but they walk with Jesus. But you can too. The Holy Spirit living inside of you propels you into this gospel mission now. And Mark chapter number 16 has this kind of abrupt ending. And you go, why is it ended so abruptly? because you pick up on the next part of the story. You have now joined them. You know Christ. You know He's resurrected. You follow Him. You believe Him. So now you are in the story. You say, well, what happened next? Well, you're what happened next. And who you tell, that's what happens next. That's the Gospel of Mark. Now, as you read this, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go back to the book of Genesis now. And we're going to figure out where we came from. And now that we know all this about Jesus, we're going to figure out, not just Leviticus told us what He was going to do. Mark tells us what He did. Genesis is going to go back to remind us why we had to have Him. All right? So we're going to see you there tomorrow. Have fun. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.